The college football world was stunned on Saturday, and it's all because of one man, Deion Sanders.
You are Locked On Buffs, your daily podcast on the Colorado Buffaloes. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What is up, everybody? This is a Locked On crossover between Locked On Buffs, myself, Kevin Borba, and Locked On Horned Frogs with Steven Simcox. Steven, thank you for joining us. It is time to talk about the game that we witnessed over the weekend. We talked about it a couple times prior to Saturday, and then the aftermath was just something that I think the college football world wasn't ready for. No matter how big of a Colorado fan you were, I don't think you were ready for what took place on Saturday. So without further ado, let's just talk about what the main storyline is. Deion and Colorado stole the show. I think their offense put up over 500 yards. Shedeur Sanders looked like it's hard to look like a seasoned vet in college because usually you'll get like 4 to 5 years, but he looked like he'd been playing college football for about 10 years and was just shredding the defense and was very poised in the pocket. Had a great deep ball. He had 4 weapons on offense that were making noise. Dylan Edwards had 4 touchdowns. Jimmy Horn Jr. and Xavier Weaver, the 2 guys we talked about before the show, they both had 100 yards, but their performances weren't as loud as Travis Hunter's or Edwards, so it kind of gets overlooked. But what was your biggest takeaway from this Colorado team and kind of how they stole week 1 from everybody?
Yeah, I mean, the title of – well, not the title of my video, but I guess the title of my thumbnail – on Sunday was just I was wrong because I missed on this one.
I was wrong too. I need to say that I was wrong about the score, and I said Colorado was going to lose. I was wrong too. Go ahead, Steven. Sorry.
No, you're totally good. I mean, I think everybody – well, except I won't say everybody because I know there were a lot of people on YouTube that were commenting through the week and telling me, like, you don't understand what's going to happen. And I think during the week, Kevin, and we sort of talked about this because I think we did a show early in the week and then we did one with Drake later in the week. As I looked at that roster more and more, I was like, okay, I think TCU is going to win. I'm not sure they're going to cover because this is a pretty talented group, and I just didn't really know what to expect. But I kept coming back to the fact that, like, surely in the first game, there's going to be some growing pains for this team. And I think the thing that stood out to me the most was, I mean, Coach Prime and his staff, like, out-coached TCU. They looked like the team that was more in control. They looked like the team that was more poised. They turned the ball over once, I guess, but that was really the only mistake they made on offense. Had some pre-snap penalties, but not the way that TCU did. I mean, TCU turned the ball over twice in the red zone. They killed their drives in the first half with false starts and holding penalties and things that you wouldn't expect from a group that played, in the college football playoff last year. And you're right about Shedeur. I mean, I don't know why this play sticks out in my mind, but – I remember one play specifically where he was rolling to his left and he was getting chased by Dominic Williams, one of the TCU defensive linemen, and he just sort of like tapped the brakes and watched as this 300-pound man ran past him and then just took 2 shuffle steps to the right and threw a sidearm rope to somebody. And that was kind of his whole game. Like, I think TCU dared him to throw the football and they kept expecting him to make mistakes, and he didn't. I mean, not only did he not make mistakes, I mean, he was throwing like darts and dimes to people. And then once, like, I think TCU came out kind of conservatively, and once they got hit in the mouth, so to speak, and got on their heels a little bit, all of a sudden it was like, oh man, this is going to be a ball game. And now we have to sort of adjust on the fly. And one of the other many things I was wrong about was I knew Travis Hunter was really good. I didn't understand the impact he was going to have on both sides of the ball. Like, he was there. I mean, Edwards was fantastic, and you mentioned Horn and Weaver, but he was their best corner and best receiver. And not only like Colorado, he was the best player on the field on Saturday and played like 120 snaps or something ridiculous. So for him to immediately step in and be like a top 5 player in college football, that was pretty wild to watch. But yeah, super impressed with Colorado. And I mean, I think you're right. Like Shedeur Sanders and probably Hunter to a certain extent too. Sure, it was at the FCS level, but those guys played a lot of snaps at Jackson State. And it was a bigger stage, but they didn't look fazed by it. And I felt like, Chandler Morris made some mistakes that you would expect. He had a good game, but he did some things that you might expect from somebody who was in their 4th or 5th start. And obviously Colorado had a lot more experience on their side from a game snap standpoint.
Yeah, I think one of the things that stood out to me too was Shedeur, because it's kind of hard for a lot of people who either didn't play college football or maybe didn't transfer from the FCS to the Power Five to understand what the difference is. So Shedeur Sanders, perfect example. He told us what the difference was. And he said the skill guys are around the same. Everybody's got great skill guys. Everybody's athletic, but it's the trenches where as soon as he was out of the pocket, the TCU guys would pursue him, or I guess at the FCS level, they weren't always like as aware of where he was, I guess you could say. And so he said that was the main difference. So I appreciated that insight, because honestly, I think that's kind of been a big discussion, a big criticism of him, as he's played at the FCS level. Well, now he's at the Power 5 level. He himself said that was the best game he's ever played at any level of college football or any level of football, which was insane. To read his stats off real quick, he was 38 of 47 for 510 yards, 4 touchdowns, and completed 81% of his passes. And honestly, I would say there was probably about 3 or 4 drops that were not his fault, where he could have completed 90% of his passes. And now I think if I had to give a bold take for the rest of the season, it'd be that he's going to have a perfect game eventually, where he's going to complete 25 of 25 or something like that, because he was accurate. He throws extremely hard. He has a great deep ball. It felt like every throw he made was in the right spot for the most part. And then Coach Prime, I think he has an innate ability to kind of, I think, use the attention that he gets and make it about his team. I think a lot of people misinterpret him being kind of boisterous and loud for him being self-centered and selfish, but he talked about it at the halftime interview that Travis could have had the Heisman had he not dropped those 2 passes. He talked about how after the game he wanted people to come at him, not his team, and which is what a lot of the criticism was, where people criticizing the team and kind of what level of football they had came from. And so I just was thoroughly impressed with everything that Colorado did. They were disciplined. I think maybe part of us, both of us, me and you, Steven, I think we talked about there could have been penalty opportunities for them where they're a new team with a lot of new faces, and they didn't have a lot of penalties. They were disciplined. There was no like extracurriculars, if you will. There was no like shoving between any team, between either teams. And I just think that they played a really great game. And I think they pleasantly surprised everyone. Wouldn't you agree? Well, not everyone, not pleasantly, I guess. Surprised everyone, though.
For sure they did. And, you talked about the trenches, and honestly, like, I think those weaknesses showed a little bit. I mean, not to talk down on anything they did, but they did give up 262 rushing yards. They weren't really able to run the ball effectively, but it didn't matter because they were so good on the outside. And guys like Shedeur and Travis Hunter played such a great football game. And I feel like Sean Lewis had a really good game plan to mask, some of their deficiencies on the O-line. And that was like, okay, we're just going to get the ball out quick. We're going to get to our guys in space. We're going to allow them to make plays. And if you're going to play off and give us like these short little slant patterns and hot routes and screens, then we'll do that. And eventually we'll make a break for it. And the bottom line is like, yeah, they gave up 4 sacks, but when they had to, stand up and make it happen, they did. I remember one of the turning points in that game in my mind. I guess it was early in the fourth quarter, 3rd and 19. Colorado's down by 3 or down by 4. And it was sort of that point in the game where TCU had just gotten a sack, and you felt like, okay, if they can get off the field here, they'll get the ball back, and that'll probably be the moment where they get their footing under them and they just turn it on. And they're not going to win convincingly, but they should at least be able to, salt away this game and win it. And it was, the O-line protected, like they threw a long developing play and they went up top to Travis Hunter. And I think it was a 43-yard catch that he made. Great throw, great catch. Drive kept going. They go score. And just every time they had to answer, they did. Like I was surprised that, every time TCU took that lead or tied it up or whatever, Colorado would just come right back and score. And so I guess like moving or looking ahead a little bit, Kevin, what were the things they did well, in this football game, whether it's offense or defense, that you think they can kind of replicate and take, moving forward as they go on through the season?
Yeah, I think they played to their strengths. I think they knew that the offensive line, I have to give them credit. They played better than I thought they were. I think I was kind of tapping them as the weak link. And while they did give up a few sacks, like you mentioned, they were holding up quite well most of the game. And I would say Shedeur Sanders was just making the right decisions. Sean Lewis put them in position to kind of, I think he put them in position, like you said, to make the easy throws and make the good throws. If TCU was playing press, they kind of tested them deep, and if they were giving them space, they were just taking what they gave them in front of them. And so I liked that. And we'll get to what went wrong for TCU after I give you a message from our sponsor over at eBay Motors. eBay Motors is everyone needs some eBay Motors in their life. For a championship team, it's all about making sure every player is the perfect fit. It's the same when it comes to your vehicle. Every part needs to fit just right. So the next time you need parts and accessories, head to eBay Motors. With eBay Guaranteed Fit, you can be sure every part you need fits right the first time around. Just add your ride to My Garage and look for the green check to know what part will fit or your money back. Because just like in sports, confidence is the name of the game. And when you shop on eBay Motors, and with over 122 million parts to choose from, you'll be back in the game in no time. After all, it's easy to bring home a win when the right parts are guaranteed. Get the right parts, the right fit, the right prices on ebaymotors.com. Let's ride. eBay Guaranteed Fit only to U.S. customers. Eligible items only. Exclusions apply. Okay, Steven, we're back. We're talking about what exactly went right and wrong. For Colorado, I kind of talked about the fact that they just took what the defense gave them. They put Shedeur in positions to where he could succeed. And then Travis Hunter, the Travis Hunter effect. Realistically, I think having Travis Hunter on the field I think it came out to 117 total snaps. I don't know if they're going to be able to do that the rest of the season. I feel like there was times like when he dropped the touchdown pass or dropped that diving catch on the sideline in the first half, maybe it was fatigue or maybe it just slipped out of his hands. I don't know. But I don't know if they're going to be able to do that every game. But having Travis Hunter on the field, I think, is like a key. It sounds kind of stupid, but like literally just him being there and kind of making plays was something that I don't want to say I didn't expect, but not to that degree. What do you think went wrong for TCU just in general? Like, what was, if you had to pinpoint one thing?
I mean, I think the defense really struggled. Tackling was a big issue, right? Like early in that game, especially giving up some 3rd and longs just by not rallying to the ball and making plays. The Dylan Edwards, I think it was a 75-yard touchdown reception on a screen pass where they had the edge there, and if they make a tackle, would have set up like 3rd and 11, 3rd and 12. That was the first possession of the second half, but instead it ends up being a 24-14 game or something like that after he took that to the house. And so those are things they can clean up. You know, it also feels like, and we talked about this before the game, are there things that Colorado could take from the Michigan and Georgia games to sort of give this defense problems? And my general thought on that was probably, but I think ultimately like those are different teams and different personnel units. But the overarching theme in all those games is you want to isolate these linebackers and safeties in space and make them, have to make plays. And I feel like they did a really good job of doing that. CCU didn't answer the bell. The first play that comes to mind is that 4th and 2 where Sanders hits Edwards on a little out pattern and Jamoy Hodge. I mean, it's a really tough play. Like, I hate to single him out, but he's having to run like essentially sideline to sideline trying to chase him down, and he couldn't get there.
Dylan Edwards is like the fastest guy on the team.
He couldn't get there, and Edwards got the corner, and he was gone. And so they did a great job of just finding ways to get their playmakers matched up in good positions. And so they'll have to go back to the tape on that. And then just what I talked about earlier, like mistakes, the interceptions in the red zone were a killer. And the one that Travis Hunter made was an amazing play. Like, he just sort of baited Chandler into making that throw. But also you have to think, like, you've been running the ball effectively all day. Like, why are you throwing the football on 3rd and 1 from the Colorado 5-yard line in that point in the ball game? I guess if it works, I would be calling Kendall Browse a genius. But obviously it didn't work, and they ended up throwing a pick. And Chandler had one earlier in the game, missed field goal. Just a lot of little mistakes that just didn't go right and didn't happen. And so now for this Colorado team, Kevin, like, obviously they're comfortable with the spotlight. They have no problem with expectations.
Right.
But how high can these expectations, like if they beat Nebraska this week, convincingly, I mean, are we starting to talk about Pac-12 title contenders? I mean, they already look really ahead of schedule for a group that just got kind of thrown together during the offseason.
I'm in between a rock and a hard place for this, because it's like I don't want to say I underestimated them. I never doubted Colorado, but I underestimated how good they could be, how quickly they could be. And I think a lot of people were getting on me for that, but I just never was ready or comfortable to be like, they're going to be great immediately because I didn't know. I don't think any of us knew, except for them, obviously. They were always confident and kind of had that swagger to them. But I think they're going to beat Nebraska. I talked about it on yesterday's episode. I think they beat Nebraska by double digits, maybe 10, 15 points. I wasn't impressed with Nebraska, and I think their quarterback, Jeff Sims, is going to make costly errors. And I think the defensive line and stopping the run was not great for Colorado, but their secondary is really good, which I feel like is an interesting combination because usually I feel like you want to be able to stop the run, but I think it helps that you could stop the pass, I guess, if you had to pick one.
Yeah.
It's a weird combo, but I think.
Well, and I'm sorry to cut you off, but
yeah, go ahead.
I heard Joel Klatt say that this week. Like Deion's philosophy on this, as far as team building goes, like he's trying to build from the outside in. Like football, like general football kind of conventional wisdom always says you got to start in the trenches. You get good line play, and then if you can dominate people up front, like you can do things, but. I mean, obviously they stumbled upon something here, and maybe it's just the changing world of football. But a lot of they've got some good players on D-line, but a lot of their guys that they brought in are skill guys, and they're just finding ways to use those players in effective ways.
But yeah, I think to go back to like the question that you asked me, are they going to contend for the Pac-12 title? Excuse me. I need to see them play against Oregon. I will say, if you asked me this probably a month ago, I'd probably be like, I don't know. But now I feel like it's more possible. I don't think it's I won't say it's a long shot because the Pac-12 is still loaded. Like there's still 5 teams, but I think there's now a 6th team is what I'm saying. I think Colorado, things could go right for them. I think they could put up points offensively. As long as they score on offense, I think they'll be okay because we've seen it in the Big 12. Even USC last year made it to the Pac-12 title game with a less than stellar I mean, we're going to talk about the same guy here. Lincoln Riley defenses have never been good really. And Oklahoma kind of ran the Big 12 for 6 years straight. They won the Big 12 without really having a defense. So I think there's room for improvement for this Colorado defense. Obviously, when you give up, I got the numbers in front of me. When you give up 262 yards and 7.1 yards per carry, it's not great. But if they can improve that and kind of make sure the offense is always performing, I think they can maybe make a push for the Pac-12 title game. Now, obviously, it's going to come down to other teams losing and stuff, but we're going to talk about what's next for both of these teams when we come back. So make sure to stay tuned. Okay, we're talking about, to conclude the show, what went right. We talked about what went right, what went wrong, Stephen. Offense, defense, both things went right, some went wrong. But what's next for Colorado and TCU? Start with TCU. Is this the punch in the mouth they needed, or is this just a learning moment?
That's a great question, Kevin. It's one that I've been asking all week on my show. What stood out to me the most, I think, after that game was Sonny Dykes said he didn't feel like the team was ready to play, which kind of dumbfounded me because in my mind, I'm like, you're coming off a great season. It didn't end the way you wanted to. I felt like they would come out with a chip on their shoulder, but they didn't really do that. And credit to Colorado, they did. But yes, I think they could certainly turn it around. And they got their next 3 games are Nicholls State, Houston, and SMU. So you feel like they should be able to handle business in those football games. But the thing is now your margin of error is really thin. Like you've already dropped a game. And your first 7 games of the season kind of went into the year thinking, that's pretty manageable. Maybe they get tripped up once, but they should be able to win 6 or 7 games. And now you have to recalibrate expectations. But I still believe in this team. I don't think they played their best game, and that's not a shot at Colorado. I was really impressed with what they did. I feel like TCU can play better than they did on Saturday, and that should help. But if you drop another one here in the next few weeks, then I think the pressure really gets on the coaching staff to keep this team together, to keep this group, focused. And this is really the first time that they've had adversity in the Sonny Dykes era. I mean, they went 12-0 in the regular season last year, and lost the Big 12 championship game, lost the national title game, but really defied expectations. And so now you have your first instance where there was a lot of expectations on you, and people thought you should open the season with a win. You didn't do that. So how do you respond? So I'm kind of, in a weird way, I'm kind of excited to see that, because it's like, okay, this is a new aspect of a new regime and a new coaching staff. But for Colorado, I mean, beyond like obviously all the attention that they're going to get and the coverage that's going to be there, what's next for them as they get ready for this game against a traditional rival in Nebraska?
Yeah, I think to round out the show here, one, to touch on TCU though, because I don't want to take anything away from them. They were a solid team. They played well for the most part. They had a couple costly errors, but Colorado obviously was a surprising team. They had 5 historic performances, and TCU still hung in there. So I feel like that's kind of something to hate moral victories, but that'd be a moral victory if I was TCU. For Colorado, I think now the attention, there's 2 things they need to focus on: not letting the hype get to them, and then also building off of it. Because I think realistically now, starting 3-0 is very possible for them. They have Nebraska next and Colorado State after that. But I think the case for Colorado to start off the season 3-0, if you would have told me that about a couple months ago, I'd have been like, oh, that's kind of crazy. But now it seems way too possible. Steven, I appreciate you for joining us on this Locked On crossover. Thank you guys for tuning in. You can find this on our show over on Locked On Buffs, or Steven's show over on Locked On Horned Frogs, and it'll also be posted on Locked On Big 12. So I appreciate you guys for tuning in. You guys have a great day, and college football is back, Steven, and let's see what happens with these 2 teams this coming week.